So, the final shape is officially over. By now, I'd say the majority of the active player base has gone through the campaign, a portion of the player base has done the raid, and then a likely much larger portion of players went out and officially polished off the story via the Excision mission. And with all of that now in the rearview mirror, the question becomes, what now? And before we get to that, speaking on a purely personal note, I loved the final shape. Even when not comparing everything to Lightfall, which I think we all consider a pretty damn low bar, I thought final shape was fantastic. I enjoyed the story, the characters, the dialogue, the encounters, the cutscenes, the raid, everything. I thought Cayde coming back was going to be some cheap marketing ploy, but it made sense in the context of the story, and I thoroughly enjoyed both the long-awaited interaction between him and Crow and the eventual passing of the torch. Even though I wanted to slap him in his big bald head, I loved the whole arc with Commander Zavala. I could go on, but I enjoyed it all very much. Looking back years ago into the past of D1, speaking as someone who got into the game purely because they were interested in PvP, and especially because the story back in the early days of D1 was a meme, it's kind of amazing how satisfying everything felt at the end of the road when the Witness was finally taken down. But again, the only problem is we're now left with a giant now what? And I guess there's kind of two ways to think about answering that question, the short term and the long term. Let's start with the short term. Destiny Year 10 will continue to follow the path we're now on. Bungie has ditched seasons and replaced them with episodes, which are basically just seasons with a different name. But more on that in a minute. The first episode and the one we're in right now is Echoes, and is currently focused on figuring out what is behind the new Vex threat that has suddenly popped up out of nowhere on Nessus. The next episode is Revenant and will be centered around Fikrul the Fallen and the Scorn. That episode will apparently have kind of a dark fantasy vampire hunterish type theme and will have access to some kind of craftable combat and loot potions. Sorta weird, but admittedly that sounds fairly badass, and I'm looking forward to it. After that is Heresy, where we'll go back to Oryx's Dreadnought and see what the hell's been going on with the Hive after all this time. Alright, back to something I mentioned earlier. If I'm being super honest, I don't know if we really needed to rename seasons as episodes, because so far they're incredibly close to being the exact same thing. We've got a story that develops week after week, we've got a vendor, surprise surprise, in the helm, we've got new loot to grind, some of which is craftable, and that loot can be farmed via a seasonal activity, which is kind of a head empty grind life type activity. There are minor differences for sure. The episode is being broken up into multiple acts, which is kind of different, but not by a lot. It really just feels like we're taking an episode and stretching it out with occasional breaks in the storytelling here and there. A lot of the community apparently feels the same, and Bungie has gone on the record a little bit more lately talking about the differences between episodes and seasons. Apparently Act 3 of episode 1 will produce one of the biggest exotic missions ever, something which apparently would not have been a possibility without the episodic format. Act 2 of episode 1 will bring a new set of activities, aka something might be joining or replacing Breach Executable and Enigma Protocol. With all that in mind, I'll probably have more to say on episodes as we get deeper into Year 10, as the differences between episodes and seasons hopefully become more apparent. Looking forward into 2025, we're going to get something with the current codename Frontiers. We basically have zero idea what that is right now. The name appeared briefly at the end of Bungie's The Journey Ahead promo video from not too long ago. Side note, no, there's not a chance in hell that this is somehow a codename for Destiny 3, because it's definitely not. We got the same old tricorn and the number 2 sitting right there next to the codename Frontiers text, indicating it is 100% under the D2 umbrella. We can only really guess at what Frontiers could possibly be at this point. The name itself implies we might be finally branching out beyond the reaches of our own solar system into whatever lies out in the rest of the universe. From Bungie's Robbie Stevens, we want to get back to expanding the universe of Destiny in general, and I think that's as much as I should probably say about it. If we're guessing very safely, I'd say it could end up being just more of the same, i.e. another year of episodes continuing the story, kicked off with maybe a slightly larger expansion, similar to the one major expansion we get every year. Although, that's also looking a little iffy right now. Bungie's expansion project lead, Katarina Masadu, announced just days ago that with the final shape done and dusted, she's moving on from Bungie to an unnamed future career opportunity. That, combined with the fact that Bungie has mentioned their desire to move away from linear storytelling, which was mentioned in an interview with Edge magazine, has led to the question, Are major expansions no longer going to be a thing in Destiny 2? In the Edge magazine article, Bungie's Robbie Stevens mentioned that they envision the future of D2 storytelling to be more of a standalone experience via the episode system. In short, you don't have to have knowledge of everything that happened right beforehand in order to enjoy that particular story and experience. Forbes' Paul Mindgoblin Tassi still thinks that even with Bungie's transition to episodes and the departure of Katarina, there's still one very big and obvious reason that we're still likely to get major expansions in D2: money. Tassi mentions that Bungie seemingly makes the majority of its bank through the major yearly expansions, and suddenly cutting the supply line on that would be an insanely risky financial play for Bungie, especially since Marathon ain't here yet and we still don't even know if there even is going to be a Destiny 3. And on that note, if you're wondering how long the episode stuff might go on for before we even have a chance at getting a Destiny 3, the answer might be a while. In their reveal video talking about the journey ahead, we see a brief image of little waypoints moving out from the Pale Heart in the wake of the Witness being defeated. In total, there appear to be 12 or 13 different waypoints making their way into outer space. 12 if you don't count the one on the far right that eventually turns into a red X for whatever reason. If we're following the trend of 3 episodes per year and there's at least 12 waypoints total, that could mean that D2 may remain on the episode path throughout 2027. And tinfoil hat time, if there's no D3 until the D2 episode train is fully finished, that might mean no Destiny 3 until 2028. And again, that's even if they're making a D3 at all, which we still don't really know if they are. And on that note, let's briefly talk about the long term. To repeat, I really applaud the work that went into the final shape and loved the campaign, the story, and the tie-in with Prismatic. I will admit though that I'm slightly worried that Destiny will get what I'm going to go ahead and call Marvel syndrome. And by that, I mean for a brief period in time, I was really goddamn hooked on those Marvel flicks leading up to Infinity War and Endgame. I'm sure a lot of you out there remember the feeling pretty damn well. We were at the end of this long, winding saga that we were really all invested in, a culmination of everything that the franchise had been building up to at that point. The ending of that saga, to me, was wild and kinda everything I wanted it to be. But after that, it was the same feeling of, wow, well, now what? Ever since Endgame, Marvel has seemingly just kind of been adrift. And if you're asking me, that's something I'd really like to see Bungie avoid with the Destiny franchise. Bungie has said things to the tune of, this is the end of the Light Dark saga, but not the end of Destiny. So clearly we've assumingly already begun the process of beginning the next big saga, but we don't really know where it's headed or who the new giant looming threat or BBEG even is. Looking back on the Edge magazine interview and Bungie's move away from linear content, a part of me worries that there may never again be another giant BBEG looming at the end of a long road and we're just going to hop from random story to random story. All I can really hope for at this point is that whatever direction D2 goes from here is that we're gradually heading into a new fun arc that actually builds to another fun and meaningful crescendo, as opposed to just drifting around aimlessly and not building towards some kind of new, significant, large end goal. And I'm not saying that episodes can't lead to anything meaningful. I'm sure they can. I just hope that in the future, even if it takes years to build to that moment, I hope we have another time in the franchise where we feel we're approaching a dramatic and important showdown of some kind. Gameplay-wise, if we are going to be doing 12 total episodes over X years before getting into whatever happens next, I very much worry about continued power creep. It's really no exaggeration that right now, as Guardians, we're literally as powerful as we've ever been by miles. Comparing everything now with what we brought to the table back at the beginning of the franchise, it's kind of insane how crazy and godly builds are right now. And we somehow have to keep building on that moving forward without completely breaking the game even further. I'm being dead honest when I say I genuinely don't know how we can keep doing that, but I guess that's why I'm not a game developer. I'm wishing a firm best of luck to all the sandbox devs over at Bungie, because that's a big old nightmare mountain I can't even begin to imagine climbing. And outside of polishing up Prismatic with some kind of 2.0 update, I'm not entirely too sure how Bungie plans on further developing the subclass system at this point. If they dream up a new subclass, it would have to be something damn good to compete with the high ceiling offered by Prismatic. Quick side note, a lot of Titan players out there will probably appreciate that 2.0 revamp, as while Warlock and especially Hunters are out there wild in, Prismatic Titan doesn't seem to have as high potential by comparison. So I am looking forward to a potential Prismatic 2.0 where the beefy punch bros can maybe climb up the depth chart a little bit. The weapon sandbox kind of faces a similar issue, and while power creep has literally always been a thing, it's sort of the same problem of new weapons fall under one of two categories immediately when they arrive. Either it's a new weapon that is very clearly strong on paper and will no doubt have a place in the current meta, or it's a borderline dead on arrival weapon. Not because it's bad or anything, but because either identical or potentially better versions of those weapons basically already exist in one form or another. While this won't matter much to newer players, veterans will simply take one look at the latter weapon option and just move on. So new perks and perk combos have to come out that are just better and more insane. And again, really not sure how all of that is going to get pulled off by the Sandbox team, but I guess we're gonna find the hell out together, aren't we? Anyway, despite the ups and downs, the disappointing content releases and the great ones, the ever-changing gaming industry, the unpredictability of the world of content creation, I still enjoy doing what I do, and I still enjoy Destiny. Here's hoping that whatever comes down the pipe, even if it takes a while, that it's fun, it's fresh, engaging, and meaningful. You know, all that sappy bullshit. But truly, I do appreciate all of you, and thank you very much for watching my content over the years. Do me a favor and let me know down in the comment section how you feel about the future of Destiny, whether that be D2 and episodes, whatever you think Frontiers is, and knock on wood, D3. Thank y'all very much for watching. Peace.